Welcome to Mindful Management, a podcast by Chefalo Consulting, where we share the knowledge, stories, and resources you need to create a trauma-informed culture that supports wellness, growth, and resilience. I'm your host, Shenandoah Chefalo. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening today around the world. So excited that you're joining us for another episode of Mindful Management. Today, we get to welcome the wonderful Katharine Manning. I'm so excited to introduce our audience to Katharine, who has dedicated her career to the intersection of justice and empathy, two words we don't often think of together, I think, and leading from the front lines, first as a domestic violence hotline counselor, to becoming a recognized authority in victims' rights at the Justice Department. A history of advising on high-profile cases you might have heard of, like the Boston Marathon bombing, the Madoff scandal, which we could probably do a whole podcast just about that. Katharine's expertise now drives her work as president of Blackbird, where she provides critical training on empathetic workplace practices. Her book, The Empathetic Workplace, distills decades of experience into actionable steps for organizations aiming to navigate trauma with compassion and effectiveness. Katharine, we're thrilled to have you on the show today.
Oh, I am so thrilled to be here. What a kind introduction. Thank you.
That's a lot. To go from hotline counselor, the front line to frontline staff, to working within the Justice Department around empathy. How does one make that transition? I don't think that was in any school books about hey, take this class and then you'll end up here. So how does one get from point A to point B?
Yeah, I often have people say, wait, you're a lawyer? And you talk about what?
These two things don't fit.
Yeah. So I actually came from a family history of domestic violence, and I was very fortunate. My mother had the resources and the wherewithal and was able to leave. Because I had this opportunity, I was consulted on just a wide array of cases, anything from terrorism to human trafficking, identity theft, all the different types of federal crimes. I was there 15 years, so it was a long time. And over the years, I started to kind of develop these just like an understanding of certain things that victims needed. DOJ, like I'm sure a lot of workplaces, is very siloed, right? So I talked to a fraud prosecutor who would say, no, our cases are different, or a human trafficking prosecutor, our victims are different. I'm like, they're not. Every victim, everybody's story is their own, of course,
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But in terms of how we supported them, that it was remarkably similar. Everybody needed to feel like that identification. They wanted acknowledgement that something bad had happened to them. Everybody needed to feel like they had a voice in what was happening going forward. Everybody needed some resources like referrals to services. So I realized that. And then the next thing I realized was that it wasn't just our victims who needed those things. It was all of us too.
Isn't that the crux of this work, Katharine? Because it's a piece that I say for me, right? So my first part of my career was as a law office administrator. So, right, a little bit different side to you, managing attorneys, which we could spend lots of time talking about. And what I came to know is what we asked, because we primarily looked at criminal defense work. So the opposite side of what you're looking at, right? And saying, gosh, originally asking this, what we call now the dumb question, which was, how could we help our clients make better decisions? And going from that place to, this isn't about decision making. This is about this idea of trauma and what happens to our brain, and understanding the empathy that our clients needed, to very similar to what you say about victims, right? Wanted to have their voice heard, wanted to that's not exactly what happened. This is and people aren't listening, and saying, what is this doing to us? What is being mired in this pain doing to everyone who works here, on top of our own pain, right? Because we all got our own
still
personal
going through
stuff.
Divorces and, have sick loved ones. All those things happen too.
All of our own unresolved stuff, right? And so what does that have to do? And so I just think it's that interesting piece of I think everyone in this work arrives to the fact of It's the people care about. It's why we came to this work. You came to this work because of your story. I came to this work as a foster kid, right? Like because of my story. And there's this realization it's not about them, it's about us.
Yeah, exactly. And right now I do training and consulting and some coaching, as you said. A key part of every training I do is that self-care piece. And what's fascinating to me is what I have found is often if I start with self-care, particularly with anybody who does that kind of work regularly, like they work in social services or they're law enforcement or something, they shut down if you start with the self-care. But if you frame it as this is going to help you better serve. So first, let's talk about how you take care of the people around you. And now let's remember all of that applies to you too. That's when they're like suddenly able to hear it.
You know what's funny about that, Catherine? This is why I resonate with you so much. Is I do a 3-day training, and self care is the last module of day 3.
Same, right? Exactly. Yes. I know. It's so fascinating. If you start with it, it's like they just shut down. They're like, oh, whatever. This is just going to be like about mindfulness, and I've heard it, and.
And what does that mean for me? So I want to talk about that kind of the realization for you, like it's not just them, it's us. And what happens because now in the work you do, the work that we do, we talk about like how do we make a more empathetic workplace? And really my first question is every workplace ready to be empathetic right from the jump, or is there what I sometimes call like pre-op work we have to do? Like becoming empathetic might be the surgery, but sometimes you got to do some pre-work before the surgery. Do you think everyone's ready, or is there some pre-work that has to be done to even get maybe your culture safe enough to do this work?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I feel like there's kind of a lot to it. I will say I pretty much always start off with the business case. The people who are already pretty empathetic, it doesn't hurt them to hear it. It actually helps them and helps them to build their case. But there are always some people in the audience, and you don't know who they are, who are not really sold on it. But fortunately, there's a lot of great research out there on the impact of empathetic leadership and, inclusion and all of those things on things like productivity and engagement and turnover, the things, those bottom line things, those numbers that some people really feel like they want to make sure they are seeing that like return on that investment of empathy, right? So that's kind of an easy case to make. And I have found that that helps open everybody's ears in the room a little bit. When I go in, sometimes I go in and I do a more fulsome, like, you know, wrap around kind of work with an organization, and that will always start with the leaders. And it starts with that piece of it, like here's why this matters and why it's worth your time and money to invest in. And then we train the leaders first, and then it's how do you train everybody in the organization. It's certainly a lot harder if you don't have leadership on board. Now, all of that said, I feel like there are things that every single person can be doing starting, immediately to build a more empathetic environment. So I don't think it's like you can't do anything. It certainly is going to be, you get a lot more wind in your sails if you have that, leadership buy-in before. I mean, a quick example of that that comes to mind is when I was at DOJ, there are a lot of contractors who kind of come through, and often they come in for a specific project and then they leave. And it was happening so often that a lot of them, I just kind of, like, I don't know who, like what they're doing down there. Like I'm kind of, not paying any attention. But there happened to be a woman who started, and it was like her first week there, and she was on my hall. And I didn't know her name, didn't know what she was working on. I walked down the hall to get something, and I kind of glanced in her office, and she was crying. And I thought, what do I do? I don't know who this person is. I just kept walking. But then when I was coming back to my office, I look in, she's still crying. And I was like, okay. Like, it's so easy to just keep going, right? But like, let me just,
Like
I
we
don't want to
get tested,
intrude.
right? Yeah.
Maybe she's going to be embarrassed, whatever. But I thought, let me just try. And I did it so tentatively, right? So first I like glance outside the door to see what her name is. And I do very light knock, kind of stick my head in. Hey, I'm Kate. Just wanted to see if you're, are you okay? Do you need anything? And she was so grateful. Like she invited me in. She was having, a family member who was sick and and struggling with the fact, like, do I go be with him or not? I just started this job and I don't, all of that, right? Yeah, I will tell you, it was like a 5-minute conversation, but at the end, like, she felt better, I felt fine, I didn't, like, derail any of my work for the day, it really was 5 minutes. I went back into my office, and then from then on, like, I would see her periodically, not very often. I don't think we ever had a conversation as long as that again, but I think it was like 18 months later when I left DOJ, and she came to my goodbye party and she took me aside and said, I just have to tell you how meaningful that was that you stopped by that day.
This is what I try to say because I think, especially in high pressure, and listen, DOJ, there's deadlines, it's this go, 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 right? Like everything has to be done. This is, you could tell the law practice in me of like there's no time for sleep. It must be accomplished right this minute. And I think many organizations are this way where everything's a fire. And people are like, we don't have time to connect. We don't have time to be empathetic. We don't have time. Like, that's why you go to therapy, or that's why you take medication, or that's why you do, that's why we drink, or that's what happy hour is about, or whatever it happens to be, in the culture of your organization of whatever, just the suck it up buttercup. And it's like, it really doesn't take time. Like you didn't become best friends with this person and now you have to manage all of that from here to eternity while you work together. It's like no, just knowing like, oh, there's some common understanding in our space together.
Yeah. And I mean, the other, like, the benefit of that, right? Like, so for me personally, I benefited, like it was nice to have this, closer relationship with somebody that I saw periodically. I felt warmer to her. Like, I think she felt a lot better. And also, like, to me, have you ever looked at some of those engagement numbers? Like, so Gallup does this annual survey on state of the global workplace, and I was just looking at these numbers recently for 2024, and it was like, I think they found that it was something like 23% of the workforce is engaged in their work. The overwhelming majority are disengaged, like quiet quitting, and 15% were actively disengaged, which means they are so frustrated and disillusioned with their work that they are taking affirmative steps to undermine their organization's mission and its leaders. 15%. And I mean, so to me, I'm like, if you can just regain a tiny bit.
I watched it recently at a training happen where were folks who, by the way, I think it's completely unintentional. I don't even think they're aware that they're undermining. I think they're in so much pain and so angry that I'm not even sure they're aware about what they're doing. Because like the thing they'll complain about, and the thing we hear probably the most, and Catherine, you probably do too, is micromanagement and criticism, right? These are the two things we get the most. And I just stood back and watched a whole group of people complain about that together. Like, so we came together to complain that we're criticized and micromanaged. And then in small groups began criticizing and micromanaging each other.
And didn't even realize they were doing it.
No, the very behavior, because it's so, that's when you know something's embedded in your culture of an organization, right? Like, there's recognition you don't like it when it's happening to you, but zero recognition that you're doing it to others. It was really fascinating to just stand back and watch.
Yeah, exactly. And then people are saying, oh, well, we don't have any time. It's like, well, if you weren't tearing each other down, think how much more you could get done.
It's amazing. So what do you think, like, if there's leaders out there, if there's someone just in an organization who's like, listen, I don't like my culture, but I would like it to improve because maybe I like the work I do. Because I think those can be two separate pieces, right? Like, I like the work I do. Maybe I don't like the people I'm around, or maybe I don't like my boss or whatever it were. Are there first steps that you can think about to integrating some of these practices into work, regardless of where your power is?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think first of all, like you can't pour from an empty cup, as we were just talking about, right? So, I know there are so many people out there who are the unsung heroes of their workplace culture. I did a training once, this really phenomenal, upbeat, cheerful person greeted me at the door, brought me in where I needed to go, like repeatedly throughout the training, everybody was kind of referring to her that she clearly was like the center of the workplace. And after the training, she said, "Hey, do you have a minute?" And I said, "Sure." And we kind of walked off to the side and she started to cry. And she said, "They don't realize what a toll it's taking on me that I'm doing this all the time for them." Right. And so I think that, we talked a lot about like, you got to take care of yourself first and manage your energy. And, you can't support others if you aren't taking care of yourself. So make sure that you are always engaging in the self-care practices. Like I like to say, you need a daily reset, something you do every day that's just about protecting your mental health, right? Like you take steps every day to protect your physical health. You brush your teeth, for instance, right? In about that same amount of time, you could do a quick, mindfulness technique or breathing technique or like draw or play the guitar or whatever, is your thing. But having just a little bit of a reset for yourself, I think is really, really key. Um, so do what you can to take care of your own energy first. And then to me, it's mastering the art of the quick check-in. Like just very easy, like I think you should start with a list. Who do I want to check in on this week? And make sure it's not just like your best friends at work. I think you said earlier, like belonging means even the people you don't like. So find something interesting about them. There in another training recently, a woman said, our office is pretty close knit and like we like joke a lot. We talk, she said, but there's one guy we were all a little afraid of. She said he's very serious, he doesn't smile, he's super smart, kind of standoffish. And she said, so they just kind of never really talked to him. And then one day she happened to be going to a conference with him. They were on a train together and they discovered on the course of this trip, they have very similar taste in music. And so they started chatting a lot more about this connection that they had. And then she was modeling to everybody else, I guess he's not that scary. Like there are some things you can kind of talk to him about. So mastering that art of the quick check-in means also looking for those little connections because they can be the basis of so much more. To me, empathy always comes down to curiosity. It's like
Mm.
getting out of your own head and actually like viewing, seeing the human in front of you and trying to understand better their experience.
Yeah, I think it can be hard, right? In empathy, in true empathy, to remember that we're not the only human. Because sometimes humans just become, Catherine, I just need you to respond to that email. I need you to do this thing for me, this task for me, versus the human that is you and the human that is me, and creating space for both of those things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I know so often we get so caught up at, another quick story on that. Somebody told me her grandmother had passed away and she emailed the HR person to say, wanted to know, like, this has happened. Can I take leave? Like, how does it work, to go to the memorial? And the HR person responded, dead grandma gets you 2 days. Like that was the sum total of the email. And I think, I'm sure that person, like you said, was just like, check, I gave her the information, like, move on. Like it doesn't take that much longer to say, I'm really sorry. The policy is that with the loss of,
Or to call and give the information, right? Just to call and be like, hey, got your email, wanted to call, see how you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And those moments of like how people feel heard in those difficult moments, they really last. I mean, I'm sure you know from your life, I do from mine. I'm sure everybody listening can think of examples of like times when they were struggling and who was really there for them and who really wasn't. Like they stick with you. And in a workplace, it can really undermine your sense of psychological safety, your sense of trust, and certainly your engagement productivity.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because even when I listened to you tell the story about the worker you checked in on that you didn't know, right? Like that you literally had to read the door to figure out her name before entering. People that have had a really big impact on me are in similar kind of ways. Like I remember meeting a woman at a conference and I thought, gosh, I really like this lady. Like as you do at a conference, but it's just a complete stranger, right? And I remember saying to her, gosh, like you're so easy to talk to and I find it so difficult to talk to so many people. And I remember she just said this like one thing to me, which was, that's because I've done my work. And at the time I didn't like it. At the time it like hit me like, maybe I don't like you. Like I it was like a,
You're
like,
saying I haven't done my work?
because I got super defensive about
Yeah,
it.
of course.
And then I never really spoke to her again. But I came back to that in doing some of my own deeper work. And when I realized what she meant, because now I find myself saying that same thing to a lot of people, but I try to deliver it slightly differently because I know how it hit me. I might not always succeed at it, but there was this piece of like, it's actually a piece of advice from a stranger that I now feel was really empathetic in a time when I really needed to hear something that stuck with me versus, listen, I have people close to me that I know love and care about me, but sometimes like when you're going through something hard and they're just like, "Eh, you'll be fine," right? Like you're gonna just get over it. And it's those people closest to us sometimes that are like,
Or, well, at least it's not X.
yes, exactly. With all good intent, by the way. Like, I don't think they mean any ill will or harm, but that's the piece, right? Is that it can still hit us. And so that piece of like, you just don't know what will be meaningful to somebody.
Yeah, and it can be quick, just that quick show of compassion and I see you. Like you never know the impact.
Yeah, I love that. What are some of the common challenges that you see in organizations or that they face when they're trying to shift to being empathetic or trauma informed? And any tips on trying to overcome those hurdles or prepare for them before they become roadblocks?
I do think it's always essential to start with buy-in, right? And people understanding that, I feel like you sort of alluded to this before, like it's essential that the supervisors, like the management of the organization, be on board, but also it needs to be full force, it can't be a top-down thing. It really is essential that everybody kind of understand why and that they kind of have the skills. To me, like an organizational transformation to becoming trauma informed requires everybody's participation and like more individual basis. What I see as like the main barriers to making those kinds of empathetic connections are one, that we employ distancing assumptions. We all have distancing assumptions. So we will be trying to make a connection with somebody and we will fall short because we are not actually seeing the person in front of us. Let me give you an example just because I feel like that's kind of vague. When I was leaving DOJ, there was a guy that I had worked with. He wasn't in my office, but we had worked together the whole time I was there. I knew him pretty well. And after a meeting, I kind of took him aside and I said, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know I'm leaving the department." And he was more upset than I expected. And I kind of like reached out and put my hand on his arm. And, I was like, "Oh, and I'm sorry," and like love to stay in touch and that kind of thing. And I'm trying to like, support him, right? I'm trying to be like compassionate. And he seems to be getting like more upset. And then so I doubled down, like I did the same thing. And I reached out to touch him again. And he kind of jerked away from me. And I suddenly was like, "Oh, right. He's an Orthodox Jew. He can't have a woman touching him, who's not a family member." Now, I knew that he was an Orthodox Jew. I'd known him for a very long time. And like, I made this assumption. Touch is comforting because it's comforting to me.
There it is, right? What works for me must work for everybody else. Right?
Totally. Yeah. It was an assumption. And in a time when I was trying to connect, it actually created distance. Right. So that's to me, number one is distancing assumptions. Number two is judgment. Like often, we see somebody who, the person who just talks about themselves all the time or, is always late to the meeting or whatever. Like, and we have all these stories we're telling ourselves about what that person is like. And that can really keep us from viewing that person with clear eyes and connecting with them.
Yeah, I refer to that as the single story. Is we just build these, we act as if people are these monoliths or you're just one thing. And I think in the law this happens like unintentionally as well because we can see victims only as victims. We can see defendants as only defendants. Like, and right? And people fit into these nice, neat boxes. And then, of course, the reality is there isn't a nice, neat box for any singular person, right? That single story we tell ourselves about a people or a place.
Yeah, exactly.
And not that we have to see everybody as rainbows and butterflies, but like that curiosity and that, like, they're not just all their bad characteristics either, right? Like, and I say this even when you're dealing with a boss that you find annoying or who micromanages you or who criticizes you. It's like, you don't have to like it, but why? What's really going on there? Is that really about you? I think has been really helpful in my own healing journey And then that piece you just said where somebody said, no, really, like what's how you really feeling? The piece that I think, because we teach around this idea of a community meeting and you ask the question, how are you feeling? People get so afraid to ask because they think they have to fix the feeling. We've lived in a culture where it's like, oh, you feel sad. Let me fix that for you, Catherine. Let me dive. Tell me why you're sad, and then I can go make it better for you. Versus just letting people be sad and off you go with your tissue, Catherine, and off I go. And I sometimes people think that that's not empathetic, and it's like it really is. Like she can't fix whatever's happening for you, but I can lend this ear. I can be there, and the release of the feelings often make us feel better. It's the keeping in of the feelings of to the woman you talked about before who's in her office crying and saying, I just don't know what to do. And I've got this thing and this job is new. It's like, it's the keeping in that makes us implode or explode depending on our personality or the moment. And so just that, like, I think we're afraid to let people have feelings and not have to fix the feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think, frankly, we get worse at it the further along in our career we get, because how do you get more senior is by being really good at solving problems, you know? And it's hard to remember that that's not always what is needed. And in fact, in some circumstances, that desire to problem solve can be a barrier to actually giving this person the kind of support and presence and listening that they need.
So we're going to get into our quick fire questions here in a second, but just kind of if you thought about the future, what do you think the future of the workforce looks like when it comes to empathy and trauma informed? Because it feels like we've come out of the cold era. Like work is for work, home is for home. I think COVID lit this up like, brilliantly that's an impossible feat. It seems like in the post COVID, we've seen a lot of movement of, okay, there can be a balance. We still got to get task and work done, but there can be more of a balance. What do you see in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe as some challenges or things that you're really hopeful for?
I mean, I will say that to me, the data is pretty clear that when your workforce enjoys their work, you are going to be more successful on every kind of measure, including profitability. That what makes people enjoy their work is if they enjoy their colleagues, right? And
Relationships and results.
yeah, and so I feel like to me, it's pretty clear that the organizations that are going to thrive over the next decades are the ones that prioritize that and figure out how to do it well. And I think, I'm excited for that. And I'm excited as we learn more and more about how to kind of create those systems and processes and procedures.
The ideas they come up with to make that environment is astounding as well. So, what do you think? You're busy, you lead a busy life. The people that are listening are busy. We just talked about this, the busyness of it. We could talk about that trauma response, but we're still busy. So, if you wanted to incorporate more empathy, more trauma informed, more human centered, right? We can call it all of these things into your daily work routine. What's like the simplest step somebody could begin with?
Yeah, I think the simplest, honestly, is just starting to first engage your own curiosity, like get a little quiet, look around you, see what is actually happening. Notice the person whose behavior seems a little different. For some people, swearing at work is a totally normal, everyday thing. For other people, it's a little shocking if you hear a swear word. I will tell you, I am not somebody who swears a lot. That is one of my warning signs that I'm beginning to like get a little burned out if I start sounding like a sailor.
For Shen, that would be her normal wanting to occupy that space all the time. And if I'm not swearing, we should check in with her. So that's where Catherine and I will differ.
Yeah, so just kind of noticing those things going on around you. And then the other thing I think is important is modeling noisy self-care. So like we have talked a little bit about the importance of taking care of yourself, but also doing it out loud, because that helps create a culture where that is a thing that is valued. So talk about the fact that you went back to therapy this year, or that you've been sober for the last decade, or that you turn off your phone at 7 o'clock every night so that you can get a good night's sleep. All of those things, just talking about them. I mean, first of all, please be doing them, right? But also, all of those things, when you talk about them, you help build an environment where that is a thing that is valued.
I'm going to totally steal. I'm telling you right now. Noisy self care. I'm going to give you credit, Catherine, but I love the phrase. I think that should be your second book, by the way. Should be noisy self care, should be your next book. Catherine, it's been a pleasure to have you on. I'm super excited to ask you our quick fire questions. And so I'm just going to start. What's the latest book, television show, for work, for pleasure, for just melting in front of the television are you watching, and why has it stood out for you?
Gosh, let's see. I will say, let me give you the work answer first and then the guilty pleasure answer. So, I have really enjoyed, there's a book by Will Guidara, Guidara, called Unreasonable Hospitality. And I just find myself thinking about that a lot. He's a former manager of a fancy restaurant in New York City, and he talks about creating the kind of environment where people are empowered to serve each other and to bring delight to others.
Bring delight. I love that.
Yeah, it really like looking for little moments to create joy. I just thought I find myself thinking about that quite a lot. And then I will admit I am a like British mysteries junkie. That is like my so I've been reading this series by Nikki French that is like just she's not actually a detective, she's a therapist who works with detectives, and I don't know. To me, that is like the idea of, you will know this coming from the legal system that like within the pages of this book or within this hour show, we see the problem, then it all gets wrapped up neatly and is solved.
And if we just had a
No
therapist
appeal.
with us, Catherine, on every single case, could we just have a clinical psychologist that's riding along on every single case to help us? Where's the budget for that in anyone's budget? Can we please have that? Yeah, that would be amazing, right? Like that's World Turner stuff. Now I've got to check it out because I just want to pretend with you. So, if you could have dinner with historical or contemporary leader, who would you choose? But what's the curious question you would want to ask them?
I really admire her. And one of the things I admire, coming from government myself and seeing how challenging it is to create change in a giant bureaucracy like that, I would love to just get her thoughts on, like, what I particularly admire about her is she had this commitment to justice, working within systems, really pushing the systems, but also maintaining this level of joy. Like, she just seemed like kind of a happy warrior. Yeah, I really, really admire that about her. And I would just kind of love to get her thoughts on that and how she was able to maintain that balance of seeing this is a problem and it needs to be fixed, and also maintaining the happiness in her day-to-day life.
I think that's the true work, right? Is like the yes and. How do I stay happy and balanced and do this really hard thing? Because I think for the folks that we all see, I say mostly who I deal with are human service people. Now, they might look like corrections officers, they might look like judges, they might look like public health workers, they might look like public school teachers, right? They might look like bus drivers, but it's human. We're in the human service business, right? In all of these different ways. So tell us what's filling your cup. What do you do to keep your cup full, or what are the activities like you can't wait to get back to? I know you got a foot injury, so there might be some things limiting you currently, Catherine, but what are you looking forward to that keeps your cup full, or getting back to keeping your cup full?
Oh, thank you. So I have a daily practice that I am pretty religious about, where every morning I write down a full page of what I'm feeling grateful for. And I do 15 minutes of guided meditation, which is like so much easier than it sounds. Like I just put headphones on, close my eyes, lie back. It's really, I promise, it is not like super intense, but it just helps ground me for the day.
Gotta love those apps. Gotta love the apps, right? Yeah.
So that has been really helpful. And one thing that I've just recently started since the foot injury, actually, so since I've been spending a lot of time in bed, is I've restarted my journaling practice. And I found that has been really, really nurturing for me. I got away from it, I think, because I always felt like I had to only pick up the journal when I had some profound thought. But what I've been using it for is just like, this really bugged me. I'm feeling frustrated. And I find it really, really helpful to just kind of flush all that stuff out early in the day.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. That's such a great place. You've been an amazing guest. I hope you will come on again. I hope when I'm in DC, we can get coffee, enjoy each other. I'll be down in March-ish, coming down for the Just Economy Conference. Looking forward to that. So I'll reach out to you. Maybe we can grab coffee. Hopefully your foot be healed. But how can our listeners find you? If they want to connect with you, get the book, learn more about you and your work, how can they do it?
Well, so the easiest place is my website, which is katharinemanning.com, and that's Katharine, because I was named after Katharine Hepburn, who was my mother's favorite actress.
There's always a story.
So, but in addition, if people are interested, every Thursday I send out a text message that it's just it goes out about noon Eastern time. It's about empathy and leadership and resilience and all of these topics. It's just a free thing that I do. If you want to join that, you text the word Blackbird, which is my company name, to 833-975-1945. And then, people can opt out at any point if they want, but it's just kind of an easy way to stay in touch. I've got to tell you, I've really loved it. It's been a nice back and forth. I just shared one where I talked about like the importance of that pause, like taking a second, make eye contact, smile at people. And I got the nicest email back from somebody saying, like, you don't know, like, I really needed that today. That made such a difference. It's been so nice. I really enjoy the text.
I'll tell you this, I'm signing up, not just because you've been a guest on our show, but I'll take any positive text that is not someone soliciting for a political donation at this stage in my life. I will take any positive text message that is something outside of a just buy something piece of thing. Because I think the message itself becomes the stop and think, like the stop and think piece. Katharine, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Again, just so grateful for you and your insights and everything you do. Thank you for everything you're doing to make communities and workplaces more empathetic. We need more of you. For all of our listeners, such a pleasure. I just am tickled pink every time someone tells me even one person listened to the podcast. So just deep heartfelt for everyone who's listening. If you need more resources and helpful tools, don't forget to head over to Chefaloconsulting.com. We're constantly trying to bring you more information, more free things that you can do to just make that little bit of a shift. It doesn't have to be the leap, but just a little bit of a shift. Please don't forget to like, comment, and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. We love when you share us with your friends and family that you think might like it. Drop us a comment, share the topics you want to hear, or tell us about a guest that you would like to hear. We'd love to have them on. Thanks everyone so much. Until next time, please be gentle with yourself. Katharine, be gentle with yourself. I'll try to be gentle with myself. Until next time. Thanks everybody. Mindful Management, Creating a Trauma-Informed Work Environment is brought to you by Chefalo Consulting. To learn more about Chefalo Consulting and our trauma-informed change management and professional development solutions, please visit chefaloconsulting.com. That's Chefalo, Chefalo, consulting.com. Make sure you don't miss these transformative conversations by subscribing to Mindful Management wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for listening. And remember, change happens one step at a time.